Hello, welcome to Coding on Crack, where today I'm going to show you fundamentals of core Bluetooth so that you can connect your iOS apps to Bluetooth devices. I'm just going to run through the basic concepts that you need to know to get started and show you how to create this little app that allows you to search for nearby devices from your app and connect to them. In future episodes, we will go more in depth on more advanced concepts, but for now, let's jump into the basics and run through these core concepts. All right, y'all, this is Core Bluetooth Lesson 1, Introduction, and looking at discovering devices. Those would be Bluetooth devices. So let's jump right on into this. What is core Bluetooth? Core Bluetooth is an abstraction layer over Bluetooth 4.0, which defines a set of protocols that provide an easy way to connect to low-energy Bluetooth devices without having to worry about low-level details of the specification. So it's essentially a bunch of code that Apple is going to give us out of the gate to interact with Bluetooth devices so that we don't have to worry about information packets. We don't have to worry about any of the physics of how Bluetooth works. All that we have to do is interact with a set of predefined commands. Bam! So this is essentially what that abstraction layer looks like. We have our app, and then we have core Bluetooth, which is what we're going to interact with. And then core Bluetooth is going to deal with all the complexities of interacting with low energy protocol stack, or with the Bluetooth low energy protocol stack. So that involves GAT, AT, and L2 cap. So what the hell are those? You don't really need to understand what these are, but I'll run through them super quickly. So core Bluetooth abstracts Bluetooth 4.0. This is all Bluetooth 4.0 stuff over here. GAT is generic attribute profile, and it essentially describes the organization of data on Bluetooth devices. AT is the attribute profile, which involves read and write commands, or defines read and write commands. And then L2 cap is the logical link control and adaptation protocol. This is what handles moving data between devices, interacting with the actual hardware that sends information back and forth over Bluetooth. And that one is the least important for us to understand when interacting or using core Bluetooth. We've got two key objects that we're interacting with. There's the central, and the central is going to refer to our actual iPhone device. And this is essentially using the data from the Bluetooth device for some task. Now, technically, you can have data on your phone that you send to Bluetooth devices, and then your Bluetooth devices or your peripherals are going to use that data somehow. But anyway, your central is going to be your iOS device. That's what you're writing your Swift code for or on. That's going to be your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac. So an example of this might be an app that displays temperature coming from some temperature gathering Bluetooth device like a thermostat. And it's going to display the data that thermostat is gathering. And then it's also going to scan for peripherals with desired data. So we'll look over that in a second, but essentially this is the device that is searching for the peripherals. Then your peripheral refers to the actual Bluetooth device that you're connecting to. It's the device that has the data that you need. Although again, it could be doing something with data that you send from your iPhone. It's a BLE external device. Now, BLE is very important. There are two categories of Bluetooth devices. You have BLE devices and you have classic Bluetooth devices. BLE devices can be connected to through core Bluetooth. Classic Bluetooth devices cannot. Let's see. I have a speaker somewhere around here, but I don't see it. I think it's over there. Some devices are classic Bluetooth devices. You can't connect to those, and Apple is a bitch because they simply won't allow us to connect to those, which I think is the worst, but whatever. It's for security reasons. But Bluetooth low energy devices we can connect to. So an example of that might be a thermostat. Apple Watch, also a good example of that. So in the thermostat example, that's going to get and emit that temperature data that our app is going to use. And the peripherals are going to advertise their existence and the data that they have. So these last two bullet points essentially define the relationship between the central and the peripheral in the searching phase of connection. So what does the Bluetooth flow look like? There are 3 simple steps that we use to communicate with a Bluetooth device from our iPhone app. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect to the device. So we're going to run the connection process, which we'll look over in a second. And that process is going to find and connect our phone to our Bluetooth device. The second step is we're going to take an exploration of the device's structure. So that's when we're interacting with this GAT layer. So we're looking at exploring the services and the characteristics of the Bluetooth device. We're going to look more at that in a later episode. The connect process we'll look at in this episode. And then we're going to communicate with that device. So this is going to be essentially just interacting with the device through read and write commands. Now here's what that connection process actually looks like. Essentially, the first thing that's going to happen is the peripheral, your Bluetooth device, is going to advertise its presence as we see here. Then the central device is going to search for peripheral. That central is going to send out a signal, be like, where the fuck are the peripherals? Then the connection is going to be made between the central and the peripheral. You can see that right here, this little bouncy animation, but bam, they've connected with one another, and then the devices are going to begin to communicate. Now, this step 2, this central searching for devices in our app that I showed you, we're going to essentially list all the devices that it finds, and then once the user selects one of those, then the connection is going to be made. And then at that point, the devices begin to communicate, and that's where the explore and the communicate phases begin to take place. So let's go ahead and hop into a code example. Let's hop into a code example, and we'll look at what this actually looks like programmatically just to do that connection phase. All right, let's look at the code for setting up a little Bluetooth application, at least the one that I showed you before. Very simple, very minimal implementation that we're doing here. Step 1, you're going to want to go into your info.plist, and you're going to want to grab this key that I'll leave in the description below, NS Bluetooth always usage description, and you're going to want to hit a little add button, and then you're going to want to copy it in there, and then you're going to want to take some kind of message telling the user this is why we're using your Bluetooth, and then you're going to want to plop it right in there so that you can get access to Bluetooth. If you don't do this, your app will crash. Step 2, this is a little helper struct. We're going to call it device. This is going to define a device. We're going to give it a unique ID. We're going to give it a name, and we're going to get the CB peripheral object for it. Now, that is something that we'll talk about more in a future episode, probably the next episode. What these CB peripherals are, but essentially this is, as you could guess, representing the peripheral or the Bluetooth object that or device that you're interacting with, and all of its information. Now you're going to want to set up a Bluetooth manager. I'm using at observable and at main actor, so it runs on the main thread, and we can observe changes made to this object. It's going to inherit from NS object, and you're going to track the state of your CB manager. You're going to track whether or not you're scanning for your device. If you're in that stage 2 that we described a second ago, you're going to list all of the devices, and you're going to store which device you're actually connected to. Now, when setting up Bluetooth, and we're going to go through all these objects in more detail again in the next episode, but this CB central manager is going to represent that central object. In other words, your phone and all of the core Bluetooth operations that need to be managed within your phone or within your central device for this process. So you're going to, when you initialize your object, you're going to want to set your central to be this device. So the delegate is the self. And then this function is going to allow you to scan for all devices. You're going to remove all your devices. You can say, hey, we're doing a scan. Let's empty out the devices we've already found. And then the central object just has this function that allows us to perform that step 2 scan. And then we set scanning equal to true. That way in our user interface, we're able to observe if our Bluetooth manager is in our scanning state and give the user some feedback showing that that's what's taking place. This stop function is just going to allow you to stop that scan. And this connect function is so simple. You're just going to connect to the device that you found. And that's coming from right here. Now that's all going to take place on the UI side of things. This little CB Manager state extension is just a little extension that's allowing us to see what state our CB Manager is in. If you look at the CB Manager state, it's essentially just an enum defining a couple of states that our manager or our device or our central can be in: unknown, resetting, unsupported. So if you're running this on the simulator, it's going to say unsupported, unauthorized, which is if somebody hadn't allowed core Bluetooth when you requested it with that plist message, powered off, and powered on. This extension allows us to basically just convert each of these into strings so that we can show that in the app on the UI side of things. Now, in order for us to make this Bluetooth manager our central delegate, our Bluetooth manager has to inherit from CB central manager delegate, and it has to implement its functions, its requirements. So those requirements are central manager did update status. That's essentially just handling the situation where your central state got updated, which is again those CB manager states, powered on, powered off, blah, blah, blah. Central manager central did discover some peripheral, and this is the data that that peripheral is advertising, and that RSSI is some RSSI signal. This is where we're able to get the name of that device. We're able to say, hey, if there is no name, let's just call it no name, and let our device be this device object that we defined using the peripheral's identifier, the peripheral's name, and then the peripheral object as a whole. And then we add this device to our devices list up here if that device's ID isn't already in the list. Again, being observable, that allows our view to dynamically show these devices as we discover them. Then this last function simply allows us to track whether or not we did connect to some device, and allows us to define which device we actually connected to, and then calls this stop function, which again we defined up here, and stops the manager from scanning for devices anymore. Remember, once you've connected to a device, you don't need to be looking for other devices at that point. Then we just have this very simple content view, and this content view is going to store the state of that Bluetooth manager, again dynamically update as that Bluetooth manager state changes. And you guys already saw this view. We essentially just have that header showing the state of our device. So that's going to be powered on, powered off, etc. Then if we've connected to a device, we're showing which device that is. And then this button is essentially just allowing us to start scanning or stop scanning based on whether or not it is already scanning. And then we just list out all of the devices that the manager has discovered so far. Anyway, that's essentially the wrap up for this video. Very simple code, very straightforward. You just gotta go in there, create a Bluetooth manager. You wanna track its state. Make sure you keep track of which device ID you're connected to, which devices you've discovered, and then you're going to make sure your manager inherits from that central manager delegate so that it can handle all of those Bluetooth operations that any central device is going to need to be able to handle, and then use that in your views however you like. One last note, I just want to point out this BLE state.title. This is the reason we created this extension. It just allows us to show what state our central manager is in. Anyway, thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll continue this next time, and good luck with all things that you do in life. Bye-bye.